Our purpose of today's session, using a collaborative approach to community engagement, is to work in developing relationships between the residents of Nanaimo and our local government. This pilot program, an initiative derived from a council motion in the fall of 2016, is to establish informal open topic community engagement and public conversation sessions. Spearheaded by the Community Engagement Task Force, a volunteer group of Nanaimo citizens eager to find a new and meaningful ways to engage the public. These pilot program sessions are intended to foster meaningful conversations and open up dialogue on issues that matter to the people of Nanaimo. We thank you for attending this morning. The focus today is on homelessness, taking action. The objective of the session is to build an understanding of the impacts of homelessness on all segments of our community, to provide opportunities for respectful listening and learning across the community, identify ways that individuals and organizations can act to improve outcomes for the whole community. Today would not be possible without the strong work of these individuals spending hours of their time to help shape the pilot program. The members of the Community Engagement Task Force include Les Barkley, Ian Gartshore, Robert Thor, Peter Urquhart, Norm Smith, Aaron Emmons, Nancy Mitchell, and myself, Bill Manners. We also have with us in attendance members of Nanaimo staff, which include Tammy Tour, Derek Johnson, Kendall Dorr, Tracy Lowen, Karen Crosnell, and John Horn. Our facilitator for today, from Gabriola, specializes in community engagement, strategic planning, and project management. She has advised ministers of BC in areas including child care, child welfare, income support, youth justice, mental health, helping adults with disabilities, continuing care, and women's equality. Please join me in welcoming Diane Dunsmore Farley.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is a fitness instructor's headset. I'm not a fitness instructor, but I do think maybe I'll get a bit of a workout today. So thank you so much for making me welcome and inviting me to do this work with you from the distant island of Gabriola. I am not from Nanaimo, but I follow Nanaimo's news with interest and curiosity, and I've observed it as a very vibrant community with a lot of interesting things happening. So I'm very touched that you asked me to come and do this work with you today. I want to set the stage a little bit before we get into the session. Everybody here is going to work really hard today, and we're going to ask you to draw on your best instincts and knowledge, because in this room there is enough knowledge to begin to tackle this very, very difficult problem that has brought all of you here. So you are our resources, you are our experts, and I have to say this, there is not a single person in this room who has not been touched by homelessness. Whether you are in a neighborhood, whether you are a business owner, whether you're a person living in homelessness or with experience of homelessness, whether you are a service provider, everyone in this room is touched by this. So my thanks to you for taking your time on a beautiful summer day, albeit to be in a really nice air-conditioned room, to work on this, because that's what we're going to do today. We're going to work really hard, okay? So I want to start this session by acknowledging that we are meeting on the unceded traditional territory of the Nanaimo people, and it is an honor and privilege to be here. I want to just briefly talk about what I'm hoping that we will achieve together today in terms of the objectives of this session. And I think it's written on your agenda, but it's really important that we pay attention to these things because this is what we're going to be doing here today. So the three things that we want to accomplish in this session: we want to make sure that we build understanding of the impacts of homelessness on all parts of our community. Every single person's perspective is important. Second, we want to build opportunities for respectful listening and learning across the community. We can all learn from each other, right? There is no singular expert, and every point of view is a valued point of view. And finally, we want to begin to gesture towards the ways that we can take action, both as individuals, but across organizations. And at the end of the day, the thing that I'm hopeful that we can begin is to inspire a sense of possibility and hopefulness and establish some common ground for action. We will not come up with an action plan or a strategic plan, but we can begin to say as a community, these are some things we can work on. So that's what I'm hoping that together we will accomplish today. And the way we will do that is by listening very carefully to one another, suspending our criticism, our inner critic, our defensive selves, our yes but, right? That yes but person, somebody says something you disagree with and it's yes but. We want to listen deeply and want to reflect on what each other has to say, because everything everyone has to say here today is very, very important. So I've gone off script, so now I have to go back to my notes. So I want to share something with you that I think might help to sort of put this in a context, and that is a definition. So I don't know if anybody's heard the term wicked social problem. So about 20, 25 years ago, some sociologists started to develop this notion of a wicked social problem. And now they're talking about it as super wicked social problems. It's sort of like supersizing, right? We didn't figure it out 20 years ago. We know we've got wicked social problems. Now they're super wicked social problems. So if you, as citizens, residents of Nanaimo, are feeling fearful, afraid, frustrated, and cannot figure out how this conundrum is going to be addressed, you are not alone. This is the classic definition of a wicked social problem. So let me just tell you what that is. So these are issues where no accepted definition of the problem exists, where one problem is interrelated with others, and where the solutions preferred to address them are precarious, controversial, and difficult to implement. What is more, these types of problems pit those involved in trying to solve them against each other in jurisdictional conflict. So all that emotion that you're feeling about homelessness, whether you are living in homelessness or whether you're in a neighborhood or a business or a community agency, is because these types of problems put you at odds with one another. They do the very thing that as citizens we should be trying not to do. We need to find common ground. So what the work you're doing is really important work. It is hard work, and it's not a simple task, right? If it was a simple task, I guess it would have been taken care of a long time ago. So I won't belabor that too much, but I do want to say that this is difficult work, but there are people who have started to work on it, right? And nobody, as I say, has the solution. So there's significant work underway, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to one of the people who can talk a bit about what some of those things are, and to introduce Signe Madden from the United Way to briefly describe some of those efforts. So you'll get a sense of what's going on this issue right now. Okay, so Signe, could you please come up?
I thought I was participating on a panel. I'm a panel one, I guess.
You are.
So I'm with the United Way, and so we cover the territory from the Malahat up to the rest of the island and out to the west coast. And so my comments aren't just about Nanaimo, but I will speak about Nanaimo and the solutions that have been, and the people who are working, many of whom are in the room, on homelessness. So to quickly share a story, United Way, we raise money, we manage federal dollars, federal homelessness partnerships strategy dollars. Every fall we go into workplaces and we fundraise. And every year, people follow me out of the room after we do presentations. And usually they're people who've been recipients of programs or who've been helped by programs that United Way funds. Last year, I had a mother come out into the parking lot and said, my son was homeless, my son had addictions, and is now housed and working, and has got his children back into his life. And this is a story from Nanaimo. This is a story because of folks in the room, the city, other agencies that have been very active in helping people get housed and secure funds for our community, both federally and provincially. So that's just a piece of hope. I've met people who've been helped by strategies that the city, United Way, John Howard Society, many of the agencies that are on the ground working to solve this problem. So people do get housed, they get out of a situation. Anyways, United Way manages about $750,000 in federal dollars that come to Nanaimo to help address homelessness. So that's a dollar value and money that comes here both from the Aboriginal engagement stream and what we call the designated stream. And one of the pieces that, how we integrate that into the community is we have a coalition on the ground that meets every month, and there's 20 plus people representing Island Health, the city, BC Housing, many of the very dedicated service providers that are on the ground every day working with people to address homelessness. So who in the room is on the coalition? Can you put your hand up? So people look around. There's many folks around from the Unitarian shelter who are actively on that coalition. So be aware, we already have that structure. Those are 20 plus, and we have some landlords and others who are very active in the community tackling this issue that work monthly. So we don't have to address that. The reason I spoke about United Way being a regional United Way is because we've been active setting up homeless coalitions in Campbell River, Courtney Comox, and Cowichan, and in the last 2 years. And in Nanaimo, we've been very blessed because there were folks 10 years ago who actively created a group that has been meeting regularly for years. It's morphed into a coalition. But we were lucky on the ground that service providers, the city, Island Health, and others were actively tackling this problem. And that's why we have solutions already in place, including a Housing First program that gets people immediately off the street into market rent apartments. In the last 2 years, we've had 25 plus people housed and staying housed in that program through John Howard Society. So I mention all of that because I think it's what we're talking about is we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We do not have to start from scratch. In fact, we are the envy of many communities on the island. John Horn from the city and I go up and work through other communities to share the solutions that we've already developed in Nanaimo. So what you're talking about today is in context with, there's many people working already together. We have a monthly meeting. This is probably the best time in my career that I have ever seen where there is a federal interest, a provincial interest, all aligned, looking at poverty reduction strategies and homeless strategies. And so the more coordinated we can be on the ground and sing from the same song sheet, the more likely we're going to get funding, both federally and provincially. We do have a point-in-time count that was conducted. Thank you, John Howard Society and the committee that was active on that count. We know we have doubled the number of homeless in our community than 2 years ago. So we know that. Obviously, the discontent city is there. We all know what's going on there. We also have, and I hopefully some of you picked it up, a multi-year strategy to address homelessness. So those folks who sit on that coalition have worked, and we worked with a consultant, 2 consultants actually over the last 2 years to create that plan. So unlike many other communities, we have the players, we have a plan, and we have data that we can use to demonstrate and make a case to the province in particular for funding to address homelessness. So we're in a you know, it's a terrible crisis that we're facing. It is a crisis. But unlike many other communities on the island, we've done a lot of great work. And your work today will just continue on to feed in, hopefully, to the Homeless Coalition, and obviously to the next group of elected representatives in the Municipal Council, because much of the solutions have to come from federal dollar that United Way manages, the province from BC Housing, obviously, but then the city and the city commitment for land, and obviously supporting the plan that the coalition has created and adopted, and the Chamber of Commerce has also adopted. So I think that kind of covers the context. If there's anything else, I probably went over my 5 minutes, but I'm very pleased to see so many people out today who are committed to this issue, and my hat's off to the service providers on the ground, because I'm in awe of them. They're the ones dealing with this crisis every day. So thanks to them.
Thanks. Too many microphones, Delta. Thank you. Thanks, Signe. Oh, Lord. Is that too loud or? Oh. Oh, that's better. Is that better? Can you hear me? I thought I did. I thought I turned it off, but
the volume was too high.
Oh, the volume was too high. You see, people who know these things. So, yes, thanks so much, Signe. And we are going to have a panel presentation briefly, but there are a couple of things that I was remiss and didn't notify you about or talk about. And one is that you may notice we have a videographer in the room today. The intention of the videographer is to capture and live stream on Facebook the presentations, including Signe's and the panelists who are coming up. Now, there is some reflection in the mirrors behind. So if you are uncomfortable with having your image live streamed on Facebook, the suggestion I would have is perhaps move to a back table where it would be less likely that you would be recognized in that way. But the intention is really just to capture the presentations of those that are here. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to do too is to recognize we have a council member here, Councillor Gord Fuller is here. Gord, do you want to stand up and just say hello? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Hi folks, good to see you all here.
Do we have any other council members here today?
Mayor.
Mayor, I'm sorry. Would you like to stand up and say hello, please?
Bill McKay.
Good morning. Good morning. So great to have you both here today. I just want to say a brief bit about the role of council and mayor here today, and that is they are here to hear from you. They want to hear your ideas. This is an opportunity for them to hear what you have to say and to hear the ideas you come up with. So this is a great opportunity for learning for all of us, right? Everybody in this room has a piece of the solution, and they're just one part of that puzzle. Now, before I get to the presentation, I'm going to, in a few minutes, invite the panelists to come up, and we're going to start the presentations. But I want to just acknowledge a few things and establish a bit of a way of being as we go forward with this work. So one is, I think you've probably gathered this, that this is really difficult work. It's hard work. And we're, as I said earlier, not going to solve this today. So it's my intention that what we do is share a couple of things in common in terms of our approach, and that is we listen very carefully. We listen to what each other says without interruption, without judgment, without interpreting. Just listen carefully. Each person at the table will have a turn to be heard, and each person's perspective is extremely valuable. Whether you agree with each other or not is not the point. You have a right to your feelings, but you have a responsibility to express those feelings in a way that's not harmful or hurtful. So I know you can do that. It takes a little practice sometimes, because when emotions are running high, it's easy to go to that place of damn it, I'm really mad, and I want you to know how mad I am, right? We all feel that. But when we come out of something in anger, what we do is we either make another person super defensive or we shut them down. And dialogue doesn't start by shutting each other down or making each other defensive. So I'm going to ask you to speak very carefully today, listen very deeply, and be prepared to hear things that you're not very comfortable with. That's okay. This is hard stuff. So if you can embrace those things, we're going to have a really, really great session today. The other thing I want to say just before I bring the panelists up is almost everybody working on this, with the exception of staff, but they're here on their Saturday, is volunteering. This is a big volunteer undertaking, right? So from the people on the task force, to the table moderators, to myself, we're all here supporting this community, have this conversation on a voluntary basis. So the bottom line to that is be kind to us. We're going to do the very best we can, okay? Now, the housekeeping thing is there are 4 exits there. There's an exit that doesn't go anywhere behind me, so don't go out that one because you just have to jump off the balcony. That wouldn't be good. There are washrooms across the hall. And in terms of cell phones, if people could put them on vibrate or mute for the duration, and if you need to take calls, if you could step outside and do that, that would be greatly appreciated. Now, I want to invite our panelists to come up. We have 5 panelists, and I'm going to call them out. We have Penny Richards from Flying Fish, Jackie Howardson, who is a person living in a neighborhood and brings a neighborhood perspective, Kayla Lillydahl, where is she? Kayla, sorry, from Pacifica Uplands Walk, and Bob Christensen, who is a person who has lived experience of homelessness, and Amy Shalafu, who's a youth worker. So could you all come up to the table, please? Now, panelists, there's, this mic I think is live, but we don't have to turn it on. Don't do it just yet because I'll start making noise again. So we're just going to pass the mic from person to person. And before we start the presentations, I just want to ask people in the room to make note of a couple of things. You're going to hear 2 kinds of things from the panelists. You're going to hear some of what they're doing and what actions they are taking to address this issue, but you're also going to hear them talk about how homelessness has impacted them, okay? So I want you to listen in your own head. I want you to pay attention to that internal monologue, to your emotional reactions, to your responses, your gut responses to what you're hearing from people. Make notes by all means, because when the panel's finished, we're going to get you to start working together on what you heard, what that meant to you, and what you can do with that, okay? So that is the context in which I'm very pleased to turn to Penny Richards from Flying Fish and invite her to address the group. Turn that on, turn that on. Oops.
We're good?
Yep, hold it right in front of your mouth.
Okay, good morning. I'm Penny. I've worked down at the Flying Fish for about 13 years now. The Fish is sort of like the cornerstone retail store of the downtown. We see everything and everybody. We see all the tourists coming into town. We see the business people coming into town, going to the convention centers. We see our community members coming in. And we're about engaging them and talking to them, and people share information very readily and openly with us. We see a lot of the street people or the homeless people coming into the downtown core, into the store. We have issues around that, and I'll talk about how we've been dealing with that. And I've seen the downtown change. It peaks, it valleys. When the commercial aspect of the downtown is not doing well, the social aspect of the downtown is not doing well. When the social aspect is doing well, the commercial aspect does well. We've just got a new Thursday night market, and everybody's invigorated. The tourists are invigorated, the downtown community is invigorated, and it's been a real shot in the arm for the downtown core. We've had problems in the past in dealing with the homeless in the store. We have issues around theft. We have issues around overdoses, around those kinds of behaviors that are associated often with homelessness. I've seen in the last couple of years a big change in the type of people that are living as in the homeless communities downtown. Years ago, we had relationships with everybody. We knew them all. We knew when they were doing well. We knew when they weren't doing well. We fed them. We clothed them. And that was just an initiative from the part of the people working in the store. And it's very different now. There's a level of aggression, and I believe there's the level of mental health issues has escalated. By and large, the community, from my experience, and the tourist community love Nanaimo. It has a lot to offer. They love the downtown. They think it's beautiful. And I would really like to see that element maintained. It's for the benefit of everybody. We're dealing with issues now with the security company called Footprints. Before, we had no action. The majority of people that work in the store are women. So when someone comes in and they're visibly agitated or visibly high, there really wasn't much that we could do, and it was very anxiety raising. Now we have that company called Footprints, and we call them, and they come in and they just de-escalate the situation. We've had the police into the store talking to us about how to deal with these issues and how to de-escalate the situations. But the majority of people that are work there are older women, and they're not really comfortable with, approaching people like that. We get a lot of people coming in that are downtown saying, this fellow's been following me. I'm afraid to go back out. I've walked people to their cars. I've walked people to their boats. So we try and help the community as much as we can. Theft is a big issue nowadays. And of course, if you can't turn profit, you can't maintain as a business person. So those are issues that we have to deal with as well. So that's about it for me.
Thank you very much, Becky. Next is Jackie Howardson, who's going to speak from a neighborhood perspective. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you. Fortunately for everybody here, my printer wasn't working last night, so I have handwritten notes that are going to be very difficult to read. So, lived in Nob Hill for 12 years, which I think, I guess I'd call it ground zero. Beautiful neighborhood, the heart of Nanaimo's downtown. It is the closest neighborhood to the downtown core. Penny has very eloquently outlined the issues downtown with homeless people. From a neighborhood perspective, it's much different. And it's hard for me to speak from that perspective because I'm personally engaged with so many of my neighbors that are living on the streets or passing through. So, once you engage with someone that is homeless or addicted or mentally ill, you come from a different perspective. But the baggage that they carry, the things that they leave behind, and not just the physical things, has an impact on neighborhoods. So briefly, I'll say from the neighborhood perspective, it is one of fear and resistance. And until we can break down some of those walls and instead start building fences, and that's where everybody in this room is going to come in, is to start building fences. And we have to create compassion. We have to also have a sense of accountability. There's this feeling that I think is perpetuated that homeless people, they can't reciprocate, they can't do anything, they can't be a part of the neighborhood. They've never been allowed to be a part of the neighborhood because the neighborhood, once people are housed, they're not allowed to know who's there, why they're there, what could they as neighbors do? Could we meet as neighbors and friends over the fence and have a discussion about how can we help you be a part of our community? How can you stop leaving needles and litter and clothes and shoplifting? We can't help you if we don't know who you are. Everybody in this room, including me and all my neighbors, are probably 2 paychecks away from being on the street. Everybody in this room has experienced addiction in their family. They've got friends who have lost adult children to fentanyl. We've all been there. And so I would like to say that the term NIMBYism should be struck from everyone's dialogue because it's in, not only in the backyard, it's in the front yard. My God, it's in the house. So when neighbors are resistant, it's coming from a place of fear. It's coming from a place of their experience. And they're resistant because those fears are not allayed. I'm just going to give you a quick definition of community. And I've done lots of volunteer work throughout Nanaimo and in other countries. A community is a group of people that care about each other and feel they belong together. They may or may not share common goals, but they've developed a relationship through trust. I'm getting a dry mouth now. So trust is the operative word. We have to work hard to get the neighborhoods on board. And until we do that, those walls are going to get bigger and bigger. We've got to take the walls down. We have to have fences. There has to be genuine conversation. We talk about that. We talk about meaningful dialogue. I don't know how meaningful a lot of it is because everybody here has their experience and their worldview based on their place in the world. This thing of reciprocity, my background's anthropology. You can't disempower a group by saying they can't do anything. They're a group of highly intelligent people. We need to realize that. We need to focus on that. We also need to stop calling it a homeless crisis. It is in reality a healthcare crisis. And until we advocate strongly, and I mean strongly, for immediate and affordable treatment and rehab centers, safe housing after you're finished treatment, and then we need to have safe places for those that are struggling with mental illness. These are the 2 most vulnerable groups out there. And then you've got the 20% that are there by bad choice, they partied too long, the husband left, or he's a deadbeat dad. They're just falling by the wayside. We need to stop letting people fall by the wayside, but we need to be realistic about our goals. Now I'll go back to building a fence. You can talk over a fence, you can talk through a fence, you could even go under a fence. Can't talk through a wall. I'm just going to tell you a funny little story quickly about, because I talk to everybody, for some reason people seem to talk to me. I live on Milton Street now by the city arbor. It's a lovely view, and often street people, lay on the bench, pass out on the bench, sit on the bench, and I always go and say, hey buddy, how's it going? How are you doing today? Most times, I'm doing okay. A couple of days ago, there was a guy sitting on the bench, and I was gardening, and I had my sunglasses on and a black dress, and hey buddy, how's it going over there? Are you okay? Okay. Can you give me 50 cents? I said, 50 cents? What do you want 50 cents for? Because I'm honest, like you tell me. Oh, I want to get a freezie. So I said, well, guess what? I'm not giving you 50 cents, but I do have some popsicles. I'll go get you a popsicle. And he's a rough looking dude, and he says, you get me a popsicle? I said, I'm going to get you a popsicle. Got him the popsicle, and then, because I had cold water in the fridge, it's so small. I'm giving the guy a glass of ice water. He took both, and I said, the popsicle's small, but they're for my grandkids, and we can't give them too much sugar. He thanked me, and I said, just leave the cup there, I'll recycle it. And I said, and do not tell any of your friends about this transaction. You know what? He fell off the bench. He thought it was really funny, and he didn't even leave the cup for me to recycle. He took it with him. So there's good stories. I also have some bad stories. Not everybody wants to talk to a neighbor. Not everybody wants to be interrupted when they're on a bench. But living in Nob Hill and now living in the old city, It's people I see every day, sex trade workers, the drug dealers, the pimps, the Johns, it's all there. And I think if anybody is afraid of what's gonna happen in their neighborhood, then I think it's the job of people in this room and our city officials to allay those fears in a genuine way. Get the needles looked after. Get the litter picked up. Neighbors will do a certain extent, but they also have children, dogs, and they, can't be expected to understand everything. So I think that's it. Let's get the walls down. Let's get the fences up. Let's talk about empowering ourselves and the people out there. Let's practice some compassion, but there has to be accountability from everybody, including those that we're giving a hand up to. There's no free rides, and everybody has something to offer, no matter how small. Thank you.
I'm just going to give this over to you, and if you want to pass that mic down to Amy. There we go. There we go, Amy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Amy Schell. I've been a youth outreach worker here in Nanaimo for almost 5 years now. Before that, I was up north in Fort St. John for 4 years working with youth, and I'm very grateful to be here on Nanaimo's territory, and thanks for asking me to be here today. I think I was asked to be here because I have a pretty strong connection with a lot of youth in the South End, both as a youth worker, as a mom, and as someone who lives in the area. And I've been in Nanaimo all my life, so those connections sometimes go back to my childhood. When I worked at youth housing on the graveyard shift, I would often have a young teenage girl come in, or a teenage boy, and just by looking into their eyes, I knew who their parents were. And there was often that connection. Some of them, I also grew up in foster care. I was a permanent youth in care here in Nanaimo. Ended up working at Nanaimo Youth Services. I lived in their group home for 1.5 years back in the 80s, so it was kind of a full circle, really cool thing for me. But anyways, I'm also a mom. I have 3 kids, 18, 24, and 29, and my 2 oldest kids have both struggled with serious bouts of addiction and homelessness, as well as mental health. So I definitely don't feel like I'm an expert or have any of the answers in this, but I definitely feel like I'm very deeply invested, not just in my kids, but their friends, my friends' kids, my neighbors' kids, and like my friend said, this is a healthcare crisis, and we are all accountable. And whether I'm getting paid for it or I'm doing it as a volunteer, I plan on not giving up on any of the youth that I know. Even though I no longer work at Nanaimo Youth Services, I have not let go of those relationships. I still see those kids on a very regular basis. I have 2 young girls that work at Tim Hortons on Wallace Street. And back when Michaela Chang went missing, I grew up with Michaela's father. We have a very long history together. So Michaela had just recently reconnected with me and my daughters, and it was devastating to my entire family when she went missing. And sorry, I didn't even mean to bring that up. It was not what I was planning on doing. I guess I was just trying to show that our investment and our impact in our youth, and we all have a responsibility to them, and I don't plan on letting go of that anytime soon. I'm on medical leave right now, but I'm going back to doing outreach next month, and I really can't wait. Our youth here in town, healthcare crisis. That's the biggest thing, is having access to mental health. I can't tell you how many times I've had to bring kids in the middle of the night to the PAS unit, and I've stayed there all night with them and then gone to work the next morning or gone to meetings the next day that couldn't be canceled. And we have a great hospital here. I'm not here to say anything bad about any of the other agencies or healthcare or anything like that, but I just see a lot of gaps, and one of them, the biggest one that I see, is mental health and identity. These kids don't know where they come from. They don't, and I mean, like, literally, that goes a long ways back. They don't know their identities well. They don't know how to grieve, and they're just sort of left flailing around in a system that doesn't understand them, or at least they feel like they're not understood. Just a few days ago, I heard that a youth that I've known for a few years now, and I've since come to know her family, was recently talked out of a suicide attempt, jumping off of a bridge. This youth is about to become an adult, and it terrifies me that have we done our jobs? Have we been accountable? And is this young person going to be okay? I don't really have the answer to that, but I don't feel like we're doing enough. I don't feel like I've done enough included, and I'm not putting that on anybody in particular. I think that there's more that we can do, and coming out on a Saturday, instead of going to the river or the lake, and coming out to share and to talk about it, I think is a pretty darn good start. So thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Kayla? Thank you very much.
Okay. My name is Kayla. I'm one of the team leads of Uplands Walk Supportive Housing, and I have been there since Uplands Walk has opened. Just a little background quickly. Uplands opened in 2014 in December. And I guess how homelessness has really affected me in supportive housing is just the fear, the resistance, and the pushback that supportive housing gets in the Nanaimo community and in a lot of other communities. Over the last year, we have seen so much more homeless guests coming just to look for a place to stay because there's so many gaps and not enough places for people to lay their head at night. So we've had quite the struggle over the last year maintaining guests and just really trying to offer as much support as we can for these guests because there's not a lot out there. We have about 50 to 60 at minimum referrals for people who have applied for housing and very little turnover. We've had about 10 to 11 people move out of Upland since we've opened, and that's not very much, so there's definitely more needed. We have continued over the last year to come together with the library and Nanaimo Seniors Lodge to create a community coordination to help reduce the amount of garbage, needle disposal, and people laying on library property just because there's nowhere to go. So we're continuing to work with that and trying to work with guests just to create a safe environment for our tenants and the community of Nanaimo and the North End. The supports that Uplands Walk really offers is we are a 33-unit building of bachelor suites, and who we basically house is people with mental health and addictions who cannot maintain market rent. So we say they're the hardest to house. It is permanent housing, and we operate from a housing first model to create an environment where we can meet our clients where they are at. And to create secure housing so that they can focus on health and family and other personal matters once they're housed. Our long-term goal is to lead by example and creativity and responsibility. We are looking to break the cycle of homelessness by housing folks who can live with dignity, safety, and stability. I'm not going to talk a lot about how homelessness has affected me, besides that I work in many different agencies in Nanaimo, including shelters, another supportive housing, and Island Health. Other than that, I'm going to let Bob take away how Uplands has impacted his life since he was homeless.
Okay, thank you very much. Here you go, Bob.
I feel hard to understand most of you, but I'll do my best. I think what I'll do is read you my notes. what homelessness, how it has affected me. I was homeless for 6 months, and I know that the Salvation Army and the Severe Weather Station, the 710 Club, and I got myself into a bunch of walk where I am now. I've been there 3.5 years, and what my notes say is I've been able to reconnect with finally secure a part-time job, and all that I worked for 3 years and I would grow now. I would grow now, and I'm losing it. I really enjoyed the job. I was able to keep the job for 3.5 years while working at a point where I became more connected with society in general and became a part of learn to respect people and identify with their struggles, became more aware, learned to deal and live with drug addiction and other addictions, gambling, drinking, a variety of addictions, having pride in my own, having a phone number, a mailing address, taking pride in my community. And I've also learned to deal with a mental illness, which I have a mental illness, but it's very manageable, and I'm able to come to terms with the symptoms of a mental illness, and it's not a crime, it's a disease, and I think I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Before I release the panel. Before I release the panelists, I'd like to ask Aaron Cummings to come up and formally thank them for their presentations this morning. Aaron.
Thank you. I don't have a microphone, but one of the things that I heard, if I may just take a second to reflect, is the definition of a wicked social problem is I heard from everyone that this is complex and it's everyone's responsibility. So thank you so much on behalf of the Community Engagement Task Force for your time today and thoughts, and looking forward to the next stage of this conversation.
It's been an intense and action-packed session. And I want to thank you all for being here and being present in this environment and engaging in what sounded to me like very positive ways. I just heard this constant hubbub and buzz of conversation, dealing with something that's very, very difficult. So thank you all. I'm going to ask the moderators to do the unenviable task of trying to come up here and report on 3 or 4 things that were highlights.
I want you to know.
I want you to know that the notes will not be lost. If there were other things mentioned, the notes will be available to the planners who were working on this project. for them to look at. And I also want to say something else about what we were doing here today. Any of you who have any planning chops at all and who love planning are going to find this pretty frustrating because you just are operating at such a superficial level, right? Like you're just gesturing towards things. And really that's all we can accomplish in a session like this. We set the stage, we got some common understanding, we learned to talk to one another, and then we started to gesture towards what other things we could do. So don't be disappointed or hard on yourself that you didn't solve the problem. It's been a long time in coming. It's going to be around for a while, but it's your efforts together that will make a difference. So could I have a moderator volunteer to come up and start the report out, please? Thank you very much, Nancy.
Since we're number one.
Yeah.
Number one, the best.
And apparently you have to hold the microphone right up to your mouth, right? So I'm going to bring it over to you.
Right to your mouth.
Okay, does that work
Yeah.
for everybody? We're table number 1, and our subject was building an inclusive community. And I must admit, everyone at the table was like, that is your ultimate goal. Absolutely ultimate goal. It was so nice to be here and to have that discussion with you all. So after a number of ideas, we came up with 3 priorities. First one is that we need to share information with everybody about who, not the homeless, but people without homes are. And just to make sure that we're educating the public as to who these people are, the concerns and issues that they have to deal with, and what that makes them who they are. And provide some kind of a re-education, I guess, of people who say, that's not my job, or they should be doing something else, and try to counter those kind of negative comments that seem to be what we always hear everywhere. So there are already things underway through the coalition, through the Unitarian shelter, and we figured that there's a lot of work that we can do, especially also with children, in terms of getting in at the school level and talking about people without homes and how that affects them. So our first one was sharing information with everyone. Second one, we thought building on a model that's apparently happening in the federal government downtown on Front Street, where people who are homeless and are looking for work are actually using it as a drop-in center to talk with other people. And that kind of brought into focus a bigger idea to have community drop-in centers in every community where people of all types of affordable homes and non-home people can drop in to talk about the needs that they have or get some information, including a building like this, Oliver Woods. There's no reason why we can't have a community drop-in center for everyone in a building of this size. And the third idea we had was that we're all sitting here in the room and we're not absolutely at all engaging people who don't have homes into a discussion about what they need and what they want. And if we're going to be inclusive, we really have to start with involving them in planning for their own future and our future. So we've looked at all kinds of organizations that can help us with that, and we felt that that was probably a big thing. If we can get actually homeless people without homes talking about what they need, then we're going to be able to plan things better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you very much for that one. So who else would like to come up and report out?
I can go and do our group.
Okay, that's great.
The numbers here.
Yeah.
So our group was addressing fear and safety. And a lot of the conversation revolved around keeping lines of communication open. So increasing connectivity between different groups, especially with the homeless community, businesses, neighborhood associations, and how to really create an atmosphere of neighbors and an understanding and knowing where each group's coming from. So part of that was developing an ethos of listening. So I'm just sitting down and listening to the stories of one another and understanding where people are coming from. And from that, really allowing for fears to be heard. It's just like little children, if you don't let them speak about what they're scared of, there's no way to understand how to address those fears. And that goes for everybody. And it's very natural to have fears, and just having them aired and then understanding what leads to them and having that part of the planning process when we're designing neighborhoods and new buildings. And so community associations playing a role in that, a place where fears can be aired, and in the development process of how we want to. A lot of things can be designed around something simple too, as having lighting put in the proper place. So priorities of addressing fear and safety. One was just addressing the issues of NIMBYism, what was discussed at the table. And this comes down to just prioritizing how to have open channels of communication between all groups. And so one is really allowing for proper awareness and public education around the nature of homelessness, the backgrounds of people who are experiencing homelessness, and understanding what are the contributors, and for people to understand that it's very easy to have good human conversations between everyone. Also prioritizing building and strengthening our forums for community discussion and integration, and one is the neighborhood associations is an excellent area that can be strengthened and nurtured, where community can come and speak about issues that are pertaining to certain groups, along with different forums such as this, where Chamber of Commerce, merchants, neighborhoods can all come together and continue the conversation about issues that are arising. And basically, who to mobilize to address these issues are, of course, merchants, neighborhoods, just the general public, security groups, police, and city representatiors. And the more that people can come together and talk about these issues will really address what the needs are to either get maybe more security in a certain area, or to provide a different design, making sure people are paired up if they're working late night shifts, and also to make sure that the people that don't have the same level of representations, perspectives are heard as well. And that is all that we discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Who's coming up next? Okay, Chloe.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of moderating the table of disruptors over there. So you guys just renovated the whole space. We had fun. So in terms of the personal commitments that I heard made around the table, there was a lot of talk around the fact that we've got a municipal election coming up, and a real desire to see these issues become election issues, and more than just election issues, but actually to see some change. So we were talking about addressing gaps within the healthcare system, but we found that it was really difficult not to sort of stumble into some really passionate discussion around housing and the needs that have to happen there. And so it was just sort of that observation that these issues are so interconnected, and it's hard to think about, talking about improving somebody's access to healthcare and having proper treatment and that kind of thing if they don't have a place to live. It's great to get somebody into detox and then into treatment, but if they are being released to the street, we're not going to see a very good chance of them actually recovering. So again, just acknowledgement that this is truly a wicked problem. So with that context of the election coming up, there was a lot of talk around, putting pressure. Watch out if you're going to run for city council, these guys are coming for you. And so talk about, putting pressure, really talking about these issues, doing a lot of education out in the community so that citizens know what's expected of various levels of government. So, what is our local government responsible for? What is the province responsible for? Who funds housing, subsidies, that kind of thing? Just doing a lot more education so that people are informed and able to be really, powerful citizens. And along with that, just really trying to foster some more support for mental health education and reducing stigma. There's a real desire to see more people with lived experience, people within the recovery community, speaking up and sharing their personal stories and feeling really supported and safe to do that. And that's one of those ways that we're going to break through these sort of two camps of schools of thought where, yes, addictions is a health issue, or no, it's a choice. And so there was sort of some talk around some of the anti-stigma campaigns that we've seen recently, and a desire to see, some more thoughtful planning around how we do that in a really impactful way and sort of personalizing it for folks. I have to remember to breathe when I'm up here. So, more public engagement, along with that, education for citizens, also just really educating our local officials about what we need as citizens to be engaged and to be informed. So we had some suggestions around, strategies for including populations who maybe aren't online, things like doing mail outs to seniors' housing facilities, rec centers, that kind of thing, as well as more community forums. I'm going to jump to prioritizing actions because I think Diana's getting the cane ready. So again, more mental health and substance use education, and we'd really like to see this happening in our schools. Some of you might not know that there's also a school board election coming up. So really looking for folks who are going to push for that to be a priority. Let's get this in our curriculum. There was talk about if you educate kids, they will educate their parents, and what a way to empower young people. Big C collaboration, so both between various levels of government, between health authorities. There was some discussion around Indigenous Health Authority and our other Island Health Authority and who's responsible for what. And bottom line is we need to make sure that no one's falling through the cracks. So we need to do better collaboration, as well as between service providers. All hands on deck kind of approach, and everyone needs to know, left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing. Increased support for mental health and frontline workers was a big one. We're seeing this, across the province, that there are paramedics, first responders, dropping mental health workers who are burning out, and it's because they don't have enough support to take care of themselves. So we have to take care of the people who take care of all of us. And along those lines, also prioritizing self-care for citizens. There was some really beautiful comments, sad, but beautiful comments about the fact that we've really fundamentally lost our love of humanity. We struggle to have compassion because we're so beaten down by all of the impacts that these issues have on us and our communities and our families. So that we really need to prioritize self-care and do some education around how we can do that as citizens, as neighbors, as community members, so that we can all get back to that place where we actually can see the person in front of us for a human and not just something that's getting in my way, something that I don't want to see. Did I get it? They're going to give me a hard time if I didn't get it.
I don't think your table would have let me give you the hook. I think they would have insisted that I keep here. Okay, my other job, my unenviable job, of course, is to get us out of here on time. So let's get another moderator up here to report out. Here they come. Oh, we got one here. Yeah. Okay, these guys will do it, and then we'll go to you. Thank you very much.
Team.
That's lucky.
Here you go.
All right.
The actual name. The actual name of the topic. I'll grab it.
It's on the other side of the
Sorry,
board.
Liz, I should have.
Oh, right,
On the
yeah.
other
Oh,
side
right.
of the board. Okay, that's
It's
ours.
there was youth, there
We're
was
7.
your improved process for
Okay, we
community
were-
accountability of all players.
Improved process for community engagement and accountability of all players. So the first part of the process that we looked at, and I'll get right to our gestures for moving forward, but we thought that there was a lot of strength and great information through our process of looking at how each of the diverse individuals at our table wanted to, what they wanted to do to move forward, what actions they wanted to take. And so they ranged from being informed, remaining open, even when it's difficult. The Mayor McKay also discussed creating an environment where real honest conversations can happen. We also had multiple individuals at the table who offered to volunteer their skills and experience to be able to have this conversation moving forward. There was also a discussion around recognizing the humanity in everyone, not feeling overwhelmed by the large range of issues in there. Yes, there's a lot of notes on here. Excuse me. Okay. Anything you want to add on that, Erin? Okay. We also talked about being aware of and ensuring that all partners are at the table, participating in all opportunities for engagement. So lots of really great things to move forward. Maybe I'll get you to finish this part right here, on here, sorry.
Sure, the last couple points?
Yeah.
So we had one table mate who committed to sparking community conversations through a social media group.
Closer to your mouth.
Yes. I think we really focused on people's personal commitments at our table, because that's, for us, I think, where the richness lies. So to hear someone say, I'm an experienced facilitator, I'm an experienced writer, and I can use that, I can leverage that to contribute to this conversation and to support this. That was really powerful for us. And then we had one member of our table who is an employee of the John Howard Society, and he, in his professional capacity, wants to work at designing a model for affordable housing in Nanaimo. So these are 10 amazing individuals with 10 very independent things that they're all going to do when they leave the doors today. These are things that they've committed to. So we thought that was really amazing. Okay, so we didn't have a ton of time to talk about the second one, but where we had maybe 10 minutes, and this idea came out. If city leadership, and this is really specific, but took out a full-page ad in our local newspaper, and it was signed by the Chamber of Commerce, it was signed by the Homeless Action Committee, and it was signed by all of the key players saying, we acknowledge this is a big issue in our community, and we commit to the following. We commit to having regular conversations with you. We commit to sharing these values about those conversations. And we also talked about, in that, having balance and sharing stories. John Horn talked a lot about often we can dehumanize people who are having an experience of homelessness because it's easy to do so. That's very separate and distant from us. But when we share stories about that's how that person got to that place, and you can put yourself in their shoes, and you can say, oh yeah, if I had your life, I would be where you are. And so recognizing that stories are a really powerful mode of communicating this really complex issue. And using that kind of commitment from the city in that newspaper ad or whatever that looks like, these engagements, to be able to share some of those stories so we can all collectively begin to see ourselves in the issue. We thought that would be really powerful. So that's as far as we got. We were just yakking.
How many more do we still have waiting to report? 2 more after you, okay.
I'll try to be short.
3 more, okay.
So our table is discussing housing and homing solutions. So we had a lively and creative discussion. There was a sense that because we have this wicked problem, this wicked crisis, that it requires some extraordinary solutions and responses. Four words I would use to reflect what we discussed, and that's sharing, involving, cooperating, and flexibility in responding to these needs. Most important is because this is a crisis, we need to get roofs over the heads of those that don't have roofs over their heads now, not 2018 to 2023. And so these extraordinary responses are necessary. Personal actions reflect these words, whether it's sharing your skills, your knowledge, whether you can cook or drive people from housing to housing, or share your organizational skills. Maybe you have a spare room in your house that you could rent out at below market rates. So we had personal commitments. Also to push government to provide a pilot and to respond. Personal commitment can involve that. In terms of actions that can be taken, we talked about getting different types of housing, whether it is people sharing, maybe they have a mobile home or a trailer on their land that they could share, getting the government to use army tents, or land that the school district or the federal government has to share that land. This may be just temporary responses, but again, extraordinary responses to a wicked crisis. There was the idea of cooperation between the 5 or 6 different levels of government, so including First Nations, the school board that has a lot of land that they can share, getting city maybe to donate land for building houses. It was mentioned that to involve builders in building homes. Builders already participate in organizations like housing and Habitat. Housing Habitat. Maybe they could help to provide some temporary shelters. Very important, this idea kept coming up that we have to be flexible. A lot of the rules and the bylaws that different levels of government create make it hard to respond now, not in 5 years or 3 years' time. So this idea of that was mentioned. So some of the ideas from our group, I think we can move forward positively. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chop, chop. Come up quickly, please. Yeah, see, this is what happens if you don't volunteer to come up first.
That's right.
You end up speaking very, very quickly. So, do you want me to hold that for you? Sure.
Okay, so I got to sit at the table with the people who wanted to discuss youth, and it was a small but mighty team. And what blew me away was the amount of expertise and experience at the table. And so I got kind of overwhelmed, so I'll probably underrepresent what was discussed, but here's my attempt. So there was quite a range of things that people were willing to do, ranging from providing laundry vouchers and groceries to youth, or taking them to, for coffee. So maybe that's part of building community and trust that has come up repeatedly throughout the day. And just us taking personal accountability and responsibility. It's not a institutional problem necessarily, or government level. There's things we can do as humans, human to human. And then it was identified there was a huge gap for youth aging out of care. So if I understand correctly, that's for youth between the ages of 19 and 21. Guys, jump in here at any time if I'm okay. So they need way more supportive housing. There's a few units now, I think, but there needs to be way more. Another idea that came up was for home share options. So that's like foster care, but actually not at all. So it's way more flexible and focusing on the needs of the youth instead of the needs of the ministry or government, or anyway, won't go there, but anyway, more flexible housing options. More collaboration is needed between service providers. So we're not working in silos, but hopefully communicating more between service providers. There's a need for a child representative for youth, accessible 24/7. I think that's a phone service. I won't go into that because I don't know about it. Do you want to say something more?
Cambridge, we have a child representative. Used to be Mary Ellen on the yard, and now we have a new person, I don't know what her name is.
Jennifer Charlesworth.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But they represent all of you who you see, and anybody, adult or child, can call them about their issues and ask them to help. And they're a very good group of people.
So support can happen over the phone as well, I guess. And way more life skills programs, and especially for youth who are not in school or in school part-time. They're saying, they're being told you don't fit our mandate, so that's just not acceptable.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next person is Did you want me to be your flip chart too?
Wonderful.
I have a purpose in life.
Diane's a very flexible, capable person. So housing and homing solutions, like the other two groups here, we had a lot of ideas about what needs to change. So to begin with, what does it mean to be homeless or to need housing? We have this as kind of a one big term, but it means lots of different people. It might mean a senior who can no longer afford to live where they are because their pension doesn't make the ends meet. It could mean somebody who's traveling from one place to another, trying to catch up to relatives or friends or whatever. Very, very different needs, and so we need to define what those needs are much better. And therefore, once we identify what those specific needs are, then identify what the solutions are going to be for those particular needs. It's going to be very different. To keep pressure on government, that's something all of us can do. We have several level of governments, and they need to know that this is a concern for us and that we want to see some action, further action on these concerns. We need to engage local First Nation. We don't have anybody here from Nanaimo First Nation, I don't think anyways. And that was mentioned saying we need to work with them. They've got lots of homeless problems too, and how can we work collaboratively with them? And then lastly, you've got a problem when you've got the industry called the insurance industry who say, you have a house, you have a home, you're renting a place, you can't have certain breeds of dogs. Okay, but then if you're renting those places out, you can't ask for privacy purposes, do you have any pets and what kind of dog is it? So you have different rules according to where you are in the process, and therefore, if you can't ask these questions and you don't know what kind of dog or how many people are going to be coming and using your suite, then are you going to get involved because you could have it trashed, and while it's being trashed, meantime you can't get any assistance because there's a due process. It takes a long time, and so $30,000 of damage, and finally you say, do I want to keep on renting out? So there are many homes that could be made available if somehow those rules could be sorted out.
Thank you very much. Okay, the last one, is that the last one? We want one more, Marjorie. Marjorie has the hammer. That's a curling term. Yes. Okay.
Okay, we were supposed to be talking about the economic impacts of homelessness, but we didn't do that. I went there because I thought maybe I'd learn something, and I guess we'll just have to look to the statistical agencies to get us started on that task. So we did come up with the obvious statement that our top priority is to provide affordable housing in the region. We had some interesting individual commitments. I will provide housing for a group of people, but we don't want to deal with the drugs or the mental health. So clearly we want the Island Health Agency to step up and look after the drug issues and the mental health issues. We suggested that people could volunteer for organizations that are actually organizing and fundraising in order to help with the homelessness issues. And we could also, if we don't want to volunteer, we could donate to these agencies. We thought that there's more place for organized home care in the community, the sort of home care that enables people to live in their own house without being faced with too many bureaucratic regulations that make it difficult to make that work. We talked about the use of Crown land for community building. We talked about getting families involved. I think people who have been parents really like the idea of having something for their family to do to show their involvement in the community. Somebody was doing some research, for example, with the Capital Regional District model, and somebody else was interested in, if we don't run for office, we can at least go to meetings and keep our elected officials' feet to the fire. Neighbourhood watch, diverse housing options, zoning, containers, etc. Collaboration between agencies, but the top priority was provide that affordable housing, and the economic impact will be reduced. Thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you very much.
Now, I promised to get you out of here on time, and I'm 1 minute late, but I'm not going to keep you very long. We did have an exercise where I wanted to ask you to reflect on whether or not you were leaving here with a better sense of hope or optimism than when you entered the room. So if anybody feels a little more hopeful, can you just raise your hand? Wow, okay, thank you. So my job is done. But I'd like to, thank you, Margaret. I'd like to turn this over to Aaron to just conclude the session today, and I want to personally thank you for all your hard work and for coming here today and for being such a great group of citizens.
So I can make this really brief. On behalf of the Community Engagement Task Force, thank you for coming today. We recognize these aren't easy conversations to engage in, and we really honor that you came out on a Saturday to engage in them with us. I want to acknowledge city staff who's here with us on their Saturday. Thank you. Next steps for the task force. So I'm not sure if you caught it in Bill's introduction, but the Community Engagement Task Force has been asked by Council to develop 4 different modalities of engagement. This is number 3, and this was our attempt to look at one single heated issue and to kind of, as Diane, I can't remember the word you used, it was amazing, but we're pointing towards solutions, recognizing that we're not going to actually get there, but we're heading in that direction. So we're going to be presenting to Council on the results of this, both the modality, but as well as the conversation that came out of it. So thank you for that. You're welcome to join in the gallery or watch on Shaw TV. It will likely happen in September. Our group is also going to present the findings of this session to the Homelessness Action Committee, probably again in September. So thank you. Please know that everything you shared with us today is going to go into that presentation. As we are figuring out what worked and what didn't, it's really important that we get your feedback, and I don't want you guys to be shy. We want to hear what worked and what didn't. So the evaluation form is in your packages. It looks like this. If you could just take 30 seconds and let us know what worked and what didn't. And finally, I just want to acknowledge, I mean, everyone is here on a Saturday, but Diane Dunsmore-Farley came over from Gabriel Island, and I've been with this woman in some pretty heated conversations, and I can't think of anyone else who can handle such a conversation around a wicked social issue where we're here with both our heads and our hearts. So on behalf of the Community Engagement Task Force, thank you, Diane.